as Susan. Is that the only 35 participants?
Yep. So far, we'll see if more people come. Let me just.
Okay.
Nope, I don't want to do that.
Good turnout.
I'm going to undo that. Sorry. I was trying to see if I could make the timer more visible, but I don't want to do that, so my apologies. Oh. Remove spotlight. There we go. Should remove the spotlight. My apologies there.
Okay, so that should be removed. I think we've got all the candidates now. So are we good to get underway?
We are good to get underway.
Excellent. Welcome everyone to the second candidate forum for the Village of Martins Edition Election Committee. It's our second candidate forum. We want to start by saying thank you to everyone for dialing in again, or if this is your first time, thank you. Thank you to the candidates for making time to have this second forum. At the top, just a couple of housekeeping things for everyone who's dialed in. The meeting is being audio recorded. It will be on the Village website as soon as possible after the forum. Once we have the recording up and going, it is after the technical issues last time. It is being recorded on multiple devices this time to make sure that we can get this up and go. Get this up on the website as quickly as possible. The way the Zoom should be set up is everyone should be on mute except for the committee and the candidates. And if the chat function for Zoom, the chat is just going to go to Niles. And so use that if you have a technical issue, if something is glitching, if you are having an issue with anything on the Zoom, you can type in the chat and that will go to Niles and he can hopefully help you address whatever that challenge is. So with those housekeeping things out of the way, again, my name is George McAleese, along with Tiffany Cisna and Anna Meehan. We are the election committee for the elections this year. We want to welcome everyone to our candidate forum, and we're going to get underway. The format is going to be fairly similar to the last candidate forum. Each of the candidates will have an opportunity for a 2-minute opening statement. Then we'll move into questions that are either directly or kind of derived from questions that were submitted to the election committee from a number of a wide range of qualified voters throughout the village. We had more than 30 questions overall came in, so thankfully the candidate forum today, we're going to have an entirely new set of questions from what was asked in the first forum. And then at the conclusion, the candidates will all have 60 seconds for a closing statement. So we are going to get underway. Up first, Alex, would you like to lead us off?
I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then it should let you unmute. There we go.
Okay.
Now I'm going
to... Now should I mute again, or should I just stay unmuted from...
Now you stay unmuted since you're one of the sorry. I should unmute myself. Now, since you're one of the candidates, yes, stay unmuted, and we'll do it that way. Everybody else will stay muted for now, and then we'll go from there. Okay.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to mute myself right now. Okay.
I lead off by thanking the election committee. I think it's been a real long election between the pandemic, the mail-in voting, the new procedures, and then this second forum. I think it's it's something I'm very grateful for. The election committee has put in this time in these unusual circumstances to organize these parts of the election. So thanks very much, George, and also your colleagues Tiffany and Anna. Thanks to the attendees for coming to learn more about the candidates, or if this is your first time, welcome. I'm hopeful that we can get through this, go back outside to enjoy the nice weather promptly, or as promptly as we can. As a very brief introduction, I'll introduce myself again, since I'm not sure if I should be coming from this from scratch or just building on the points we made last time. Briefly, I'm an engineer by profession. I work on medical devices. I'm a Frisbee player by hobby. I currently coach the U.S. national Frisbee team. I have 2 young kids, ages 6 and 3, and I live at the end of Bradley Lane. At a high-level summary of my candidacy, I joked in the last forum that you could summarize my candidacy as saying, make the village council something you don't have to care about again. I think that, put another way, I've been very grateful for a well-run village council that's kept the village operating smoothly. I've benefited from all the volunteer hours that council members have put in before me. I'm running with the goals to maintain a well-run village council and do my turn in service for all of the residents. I think the village council has modest responsibilities and modest scope. I'd like to stick to that modest scope and execute on the village's responsibilities as well as possible. My big item as a candidate is good communication. I'd like to stay objective, balanced, respectful, and patient as a council member. My friends have described me that way, and I aspire to those goals, or will aspire to them on the village council too. That's
Okay,
it.
and then
George.
I'm going to
You're
ask
muted.
George. I'm asking. There we go.
Yeah, with the new setup, I realized that I need to not go on mute in between things. Thank you, Alex.
Sure.
Larry?
Larry, hang on.
Larry, you're muted still. You'll have to start over.
There we go.
Thank you. In the past couple of years, there's been some major changes done to the charter and our ordinances that essentially have not had the open sunshine character that the state requires, and we should, under proper ethics, do. Pretty much without village knowledge or awareness, we've had both our charter and ordinances changing so that we've lost some of the protections against financial misconduct. Those have been removed. The right of the council to cancel elections has been installed and created with very few villagers even aware that they now have those powers. The sign ordinance was created that was an attempt to take away our rights of placing signs in our own yard, an action of free speech. People come to council meetings to discuss things that they're concerned about, that they have problems with. They're ignored in many cases. They don't even know. They even are implied that they offer to write information, do some research, they send it in. It's totally ignored. This type of activity will not happen if I'm elected. I consider all villagers my peers. I want to hear what you have to say. If you have some criticism about my conduct or the village's conduct or anything else that you're upset about, I will listen to you. And I will think about it, and I'll respond back to you about it. I will not ignore what you're doing. That's your right. This is your money. This is your village. It's my job as your delegate to understand that. And that's going to be a primary thing that's very important. I also promise you that I'm going to push those regulations back so you do have the financial protections, that no sign ordinances or any other punitive thing like that ever occurs again without a referendum. I want you, the villagers, to make these decisions as much as possible, not the council members. This is your village.
Thank you, Larry. Marty?
Thanks. Can y'all hear me? Hi, everyone, and thanks for taking time on this gorgeous afternoon, and thanks again to the committee and to the village for having a forum here. And these are really important issues. This is an important election. I agree with virtually everything that Larry said. There's been some council actions here that have been very troubling, and the way the residents have been treated at meetings, being cut off or not even getting a notice of the meeting until an hour or two beforehand, that comes across as disrespectful. I wouldn't treat my colleagues that way, and I consider every villager my colleagues. I think it's really important to talk about two issues here. One is the practical work that has not been gotten done in the last couple of years. One of my pledges is that the first thing I will do is get those nice rubber speed humps on every street in the village that wants them. Thornapple, which is right near me, is so dangerous these days. And those speed humps only cost $1,000 to $1,200. I mean, I would do that out of my own pocket, but we have village funds for that. We have a surplus in our budget, and we should be putting those speed humps to slow down the speeding traffic on every street that wants it. I pledge to do that my first week in office. I will start on that project and do it fast. I'm very efficient. The second thing, besides taking care of like the practical stuff that needs to be done, is to deal with this whole atmosphere of negativity that's been created here. And there are some simple management things that you can do to make people feel respected instead of disrespected. Not cutting people off at meetings, giving people more advance notice, because we're busy. We make more than 2 hours to be able to attend a meeting, and these meetings affect our lives. So more advance notice of meetings. I would certainly want referendums on any major issues. I want to have public forums before we even consider starting any new ordinances. These ordinances this past year were cart before the horse. They drafted the ordinance, had the attorney draft an ordinance without even asking us, the villagers, the neighborhood, whether we wanted those kinds of ordinances. That was a waste of time and money. And I'm an economist. I'm very efficient. I'm also a human rights activist, and I believe in fair, clean voting. I've been concerned about some of the changes in the voting regulations this year. There are things we can do about the respect and the practicality, and I ask for your vote. I'll do them.
Thank you, Marty. Andrew?
Thank you, George, and thank you to the election committee for organizing today's forum. Again, my name is Andrew Couters, and along with my wife Haley and our 3 sons, Henry, Max, and Eli, as well as our 14-year-old dog Oscar, we have lived on Turner Lane for almost 10 years now. We love this community. We love our parks, the public schools our kids attend, and really appreciate the community here on Turner Lane and the sense of community throughout Martin's Additions. What makes our village so wonderful is its diversity of opinion. But what I think we can all agree on is that things have become acrimonious, to say the least, at times, and there's a general need to lower the temperature. We need a reset and return to a more civil discourse. What I do think would help in that regard is diversity of opinion on the council, and not a council chair endorsing candidates to, in my opinion, surround herself with like-minded peers. My goal is to dispassionately advocate on behalf of all of our neighbors and to embrace that diversity of opinion by empowering all of the voices of our community, old and new. As I've said before, we have an incredible talent pool of professionals and retirees who made this community what it is today. Finally, I've raised 2 issues of concern during my years here before I entered the race. Additional resources for policing at night and addressing the dangers presented by speeding vehicles on our streets. Especially on the latter, I truly don't understand what we're waiting for. Studies and surveys are great, but we have the means to prevent tragedy, and we must do it now. God forbid a kid gets hit and the council was sitting on a rainy day fund with millions in the bank. Speed bumps on all of our streets can help mitigate the enormous risks. I have many other areas of concern, but I decided to run because putting signs on my front lawn reminding folks that our streets aren't racetracks just didn't get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Katie?
Oh, okay, mic check. Can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, villagers of Martin's Addition. Thank you for taking time out of your weekend to join the candidates for this forum. I'm Katie Filipchek Howard of 3510 Taylor Street, where I reside with my husband Steve, our 2 daughters Hannah and Heidi, and our kids. It's all stations that we have shared throughout the years of our beloved neighborhood. I'm seeking a seat on the village council because the time has come for change in the form of fairer and more respectful representation. During this campaign, I visited all 325 homes of our VMA's 14th Street and grew even more appreciative of the diversity and style and character of our homes. And it's my great hope that we will further see greater diversity reflect in our 5-member council. Like many of you, during the course of the coronavirus pandemic in this challenging year, my family and I have spent a lot more time at home. I'll admit some days the walls of our bungalow built in 1924 felt like they were closing in on us. So value have a beautiful neighborhood to is outdoor into family or restorative run. For those of you who don't know me as a candidate, I'm also a runner in the neighborhood. Our neighborhood streets and sidewalks have been my training ground for 14 marathons to date. So I'm aware safety movements are needed throughout the neighborhood. And while our VMA streets appear peaceful on the surface, they are not behind the scenes in the form of our current representation. I know there is room for improvement in the way our council operates and treats residents in ways we can all feel safer and more respected. Everybody in this village deserves a voice, and I will go the extra mile to listen and work with these residents. Thank you to the Elections Committee for this second forum. Good luck to all the candidates who are running. I look forward to answering the residents' questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Brian?
Thank you. Good evening, neighbors. My name is Brian Oliver. I'm a proud resident of Delfield Street, where I live with my wife, Teresa, my daughters, Maddie and Emma, our new son, Grayson, and our dog, Cooper. I also, too, would like to take the time to thank this year's election committee for your endless work. It seems you guys have gone above and beyond to make sure this is a fair and community-driven election, making sure this forum was hosted for a second time tonight. Thank you for that. And making sure there was great questions submitted by residents that we're going to answer tonight. And I also think we'd be remiss if we, again, didn't thank the members of the current council. I think Susan, Todd, Arthur, Katya, and Jeffrey have done a great job during this pandemic to make sure our villages run smoothly at a time during unprecedented restrictions and difficulties that no one had foreseen. If elected, I'm committed to an open, civil, fact-based approach to governance. I think it's important that we have a council that remains dedicated to this responsibility, continue reliable and efficient village service, neighborhood walkability, and resident safety, and improving village community engagement. This election has seemed to become a us versus them, and it's something that's really gotten on my thoughts because we're such a small neighborly community. We're all lucky to live here. From the north end to the south end, we have engaging, friendly, and respectful neighbors, and I think it's time that this neighborhood gets back to that. If I am lucky enough to get your vote, I look to improving the village council as we go forward, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brian. So we'll now move into questions. Larry and Marty, I think you guys have muted yourself again, and
I will.
You might, Niles. Okay, thanks. Okay, so the questions today, again, were built off of the questions that were submitted to the election committee over the past several weeks leading up to the first forum. Our first question reflects a couple of questions that came in, but specifically includes an ask from Monty Bolland. The Village of Martins Addition budget for fiscal year 21 is currently being discussed and will be voted on by the council at the next meeting. And this is the question from Monty, would you be open to changing VMA bylaws to allow the VMA to open up its coffers for certain community projects, such as improvements to Shepherd Park? And one thing really quickly for the candidates before we drop into the questions. I know we had this issue last time. There's 6 of you. If you do need me to repeat the question, please just ask. I'm happy to repeat it. I know sometimes by the time it gets to you, it might you might want to hear the exact wording again. So first up with the response is Katie.
I think I have to. I'm going to ask her to. Okay, there you go.
Okay, everyone hear me? Thank
Yep.
you. Thank you, Monty, for the question. Yes, open up the coffers. As Andrew said, the rainy day fund. And I remember a rainy day in June when my Taylor Street looked like Rock Creek. So flooding, erosion, yes, community and enhancements, all of this money could go to that. It's our money, and it's currently in a treasure chest. I think there's also, a number of priorities and what could be the money could be used for first. But absolutely, that is what I'm here for. I want to see improvements to our community where I grew up in Shepherd Park, where I grew up playing and with my children. And the time has come. Enough already. Specifically, we need to know what specifically you'd like to see done at Shepherd Park. But yes, to answer your question.
Thank you, Katie. Andrew?
Thanks, George, and thanks, Monty. You've been very outspoken on this, and I really appreciate it. I also know that you're poolside right now because I just ran into you on Turner. Look, I think David Salter, who I don't know, he said it best in his response in the listserv recently. There's being responsible and saving for a rainy day, and then there's VMA's financial situation, which is admirable but odd. That's his quote. Nothing in our charter tells the council how much needs to be in the bank for a rainy day fund, unless there was an ordinance, one of the 90 plus that I missed. But thankfully, we have a considerable rainy day fund, a capital improvements fund, and then some. Based on the auditor's advice, we play it safe and conservative, which is great. But we can do both. We can protect ourselves from the next recession, have a rainy day fund, and still reinvest in our community. So I would propose collecting additional ideas to David's option A, which he shared with us, and which were amazing. And I think an open forum would be a perfect setting for such a process. So I absolutely agree with Monty.
Thank you, Andrew. Alex?
Thanks, George. Yeah. My answer is also yes. It's a yes, but starting with the yes, I think the Shepherd Park idea is a great example of something that fund could be used to improve. It's a community park, and having a very nice high-end park really helps everybody in our neighborhood. I also think that some of those funds will likely be spent on projects to be proposed by the walkability survey. I think pedestrian safety is a big deal to all the candidates in this debate. You'll probably hear us all touch on that. And I expect some capital expenses to come from the suggestions there. But, here's the but, I do think that preserving the rainy day fund is important. I think that there's a variety of economic prognostications about the future, and some of them are not very rosy. I think it's important for the village council to be prepared for some of those less than great outcomes for the United States economy, and make sure that we're safe for all of our operations going forward in those events.
Thank you, Alex. Marty?
Yes, thanks. This is a great question. And my answer is also yes. I've looked at the audits and I've looked at the village budgets for years now. And as an economist, I pay attention to making sure we have sufficient reserves. We have more than sufficient reserves. Usually it's about a year's, income that you need to have reserve. We've got 3 times that. We have funds already set aside for the walkability improvements. That's a separate capital project. So the money is available, and I think it's wrong to just sit on it. I think there are things we could use it for right now. Some years ago, there was a big furor in this village when Martin's Additions was the only village in the area that refused to contribute to Chevy Chase Elementary School when they were in dire straits and needed help. And that was it divided everybody. I mean, what we need to do is have a system to decide where the money will go. And I think community forums are the place to start. This is our money, it's our village. I think that it'd be great to consider opening up that section where we're prohibited right now from spending money like this. I'd give more to Manna or Martha's Table. I would be looking at things we could do for groups that this community, as a community, wants to support. And I think sitting on the money is not the best way to use it. So, amen, we have a surplus. Let's look at it as a community and start putting it to work in positive ways.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you. Brian?
Thanks. For clarification, when I was looking at the budget right now, and for 2022, there's $500,000 that has already been designated for the walkability study. I think, yes, we should utilize that and go ahead and implement the prototype streets that were outlined in the first phase of the study and from the second phase of the study. There's $500,000 that is designated for streets. I think that can also be used as part of the walkability study for improving things like the speed bumps and things like that. There's $500,000 for other capital projects, things like stormwater management that Katie mentioned. Those are areas that have opportunity. And then there is the $1 million that the auditor has recommended as a reserve for financial times. So my answer is yes, but I totally feel Marty's concerns about Shepherd Park, but Shepherd Park is actually outside of the territory of Martin's Additions. I think it's going to take work with the county on that. It's just like the stormwater issues are going to take work with the other members of the county. So yes, but.
Thank you, Brian. Larry?
I want to go back to something that Marty said in a couple of council meetings that I think should be considered. When we were doing the walkability study, we discovered, all of us got done with our surveys, the 5 of us that were working on it. And lo and behold, Marty, who wasn't on it, observed something that we all missed. And that is there's a huge passage of children on bicycles and walking through the parking area of the supermarket. And there's no protection for them whatsoever. And there are other situations, such as at the south end of the village, where people can't even walk over to the park. And yes, I would like to see some improvements done in Shepherd Park. But before that, I would like to see if we can't use some of that money to get a right-of-way for the south end to get to the park, and there's another place where the consultant showed that we could establish a right-of-way that kids wouldn't have to use that parking area. So for safety reasons, I would look at that first.
Thank you, Larry. So our second question actually dovetails nicely with a number of responses from the candidates. The Village of Martins Addition just spent a significant amount of time, energy, and funding on a walkability study. Can you talk about what recommendations the committee made that you found most compelling, and if there is anything that you, as a council member, would like to add to the findings of the walkability study? Marty?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. I thought the walkability team did a great job. But I think that they left out, for example, the need for speed humps on Turner. There's speeding traffic going to the park there. And as Larry just said, the situation in that parking area behind the shops is really dangerous. Kids are there, there's skateboards and all. And that's an issue that I would add certainly to look at, because there's got to be a safer way to get kids through there. I'm scared to death somebody's going to get really hurt. The other thing I'd like to consider, besides the speed humps, I love the fact that they found that speed humps were so effective. And these rubber speed humps, they even come recycled these days for all the environmentalists out there. I like that. They're not noisy. They really work. They do work. They slow down the speed. But there's also some options that we need to look at, like putting flashing yellow lights, small ones, on the stop signs. One of the problems over here on Thornapple is that people blow through these stop signs like they weren't even there. And so, flashing lights are an option that the committee did not look at, but I would. I think that we can build on what they did, and this is great. I'm so pleased we have this as a base. Let's start implementing. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Brian?
With walkability, I think that we need to upgrade the crosswalks, as the study mentioned. I think we need to paint curbs for no parking areas in certain areas. I most importantly think there is a need for a prototype street, as the walkability survey showed, with traffic calming. And likely those would either be Cummings, based on the amount of traffic volume, or Thornapple West, which is based on the average speed. Curb extensions and speed humps is what that prototype street would look like. I also think we need to approve phase 2, look at sidewalks if they're necessary on certain blocks. I think it's a block by block issue. Every homeowner was aware when they purchased their property that they had a right of way on their property, but that it's going to come to a block by block. But the additional approach I'd like to look at too is perhaps allowing a code to change to the building code to allow a second curb cut on many of the properties, to allow for a permeable circular drive. I think that would get some of the traffic off the streets that are parked there, increase visibility, and as long as a villager assumes the risk for any damage to it, I think it's another option.
Thank you, Brian. Katie?
Well, first of all, thank you to the volunteer residents who conducted this study and made these exceptional findings and suggestions. So let's actually make some changes. I live on a one-way street, intersection of Taylor and Chestnut Street. It's a bevy of large construction vehicles, delivery trucks making the round, competing with bikers, walkers, runners, walkers, scooters. And just yesterday, I lost my breath as a child on a scooter was rounding the curve and almost got hit by a car. I think better signage, some of the crosswalks that were designed in the study should be put forth. We have the money to do this. It should be done. And let's talk about other streets like Thornapple Street. The residents on this thoroughfare are fed up. Like them, I'm calling for improvements on sidewalks, crosswalks, and the speed bumps. And also to fix the crosswalk, I think that's been raised at Brookville and Bradley.
Thank you, Katie. Alex?
Thanks, George. Yeah, I think the recommendation was, Marty, for speed humps on Thornapple and Summit. So I think that was in the survey, and I agree with you on that, the viability of that. The survey, George, your question was what part of the results of the report really resonated with me, and the thing that most strongly resonated with me was the, identification, or the the clear statement that Brookville represents a significant hazard. I feel that way when our kids and I walk down Brookville to get, we walk as briefly as possible and immediately cut over on Cummings to get to Shepherd Park. I thought the walkability report that recommended a change to separate or better separate traffic from pedestrians on Brookville Road was the most impactful or most important part to me.
Thank you, Alex. Larry?
All right, George, the timer sometimes gets hidden, so I just had to guess at the time.
Okay,
Larry?
thank you. Thank you. So those of you who haven't, I would ask you to look at Montgomery County website called Vision Zero. Vision Zero is an international plan. Governor Hogan has made Maryland a Vision Zero state, and Vision Zero means no pedestrian injuries by 2023. They identified engineering, education, and enforcement as the three most effective things to make that happen. So under engineering, the comment about speed humps is entirely appropriate. In addition to that, rumble strips near the intersections are extremely important because rumble strips not only make the driver pay attention, they alert, imagine a Tesla coming up behind you. They alert a pedestrian that there is a car there. So it does an extra amount of protection. On education, which is really important, we should paint all of our crosswalks. Some of you may not know that wherever two streets meet in Maryland, you in fact have crosswalks, and ours all should be painted.
Thank you, Larry.
We don't have any yield to pedestrian signs, and
Larry, thank you.
are allowed to walk anywhere in Martin's Additions.
Larry, your time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Andrew?
Thanks, George. I was gonna give Larry 15 seconds, but I'll use them instead. But look, I thought the presentation was great. I thought that the job was incredible. What they came up with was very compelling. Thornapple and Cummings clearly take the brunt in terms of the speeders and the cut through traffic. But just like Marty said, speed bumps, speed bumps, speed bumps. I don't know what we're waiting for. This is the easiest way to address some of the speeding. And I think we also need to listen to the residents. We spoke to folks on Thornapple who are saying, sidewalks don't work, but speed bumps and maybe one-way traffic. I think, again, this goes to an open forum, hearing what people have to say. Maybe even during rush hour, if we can spend a little bit more money in terms of enforcing stop signs during rush hour at Brookville, having cops there, just so people stop when the kids cross, things like that. I mean, there are ways to address this that I'd be happy to engage with you guys on.
Thank you, Andrew. So our next question comes from Kathy Cleon. I'm sorry, I can see you are in the chat, and I apologize in advance if that is a butchering pronunciation of your last name. But so from Kathy, the Martin's Addition Google group serves as a clearinghouse for neighbors to share all kinds of useful information. However, it is not an official function of the village. Do you support creating an official listserv? Larry?
I support the present listserv. I also support a listserv that is funded by the council, but I do not want government to impinge on people's right of speech. So it would have to be something that is hosted and controlled totally by another. There are companies that will do that for you. The village cannot suppress anything that occurs on it, and we do have the rights of free speech. I want to thank everybody who is a grumbler on that listserv. I've learned so much from you, and it's made me think and learn and come up with new ideas. And that kind of criticism is sorely needed to have a good government. So yes, anything that in communications, I'm very much for to improve the situation that exists now. And I want to thank Jeff Blanders and Arthur Alexander as being the only council members who actually go on that listserv. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Larry. Alex?
Yes, absolutely. I think this is sort of a cornerstone or motivating issue for me for my candidacy on the council. I think that the new communication tool needs to incorporate sort of 3 different and important functions. It needs to be able to do what the constant contact email list does now, which is information that's communicated generally by Niles to the community that everybody needs to know, sort of important stuff about day-to-day functions of the village, or anything else that's that needs attention at the moment. But I think it also needs to facilitate discussion on new ordinances, the kind of thing that the listserv has done, but that the council members have been reluctant to participate in. I, like Larry, applaud the council members who do go on there, and I intend to go on there if that is the only or most effective way to communicate with village residents about ordinances. But I understand that they have, especially from their legal background, have some hesitancy to do that because of the way that it's run. Now, I don't really share those hesitancies, but I understand that they have them. I think that those hesitancies would go away, and future council members would be more freely, I guess, encouraged to participate on a different form of that listserv.
Thank you, Alex.
Thirdly, you would also have community posts.
Thank you, Alex.
Sure.
Brian?
Thank you, George. I absolutely would support and encourage the creation of a listserv run by the village. The current listserv is a privately moderated outlet that's not a practical nor useful tool for village business. It's a tool for discussion of the neighborhood, but it's privately moderated, it's censored. So I think the village absolutely needs an outlet such as a bulletin board and a listserv and other things. There are companies out there that can supply these outsourced resources for the village. We have limited resources and means of one full-time employee, one part-time employee, but there's ways that we can do this that are open, outgoing. We live in a reserved, calm, and peaceful neighborhood. We should have the ability to give feedback without attack. So I'm absolutely for a village-run listserv.
Thank you, Brian. Katie?
Oh, well, thank you to Kathy. Yes, I do. I applaud the current listserv, but perhaps we need 2 VMA listservs, one run by the VMA and the other by the community to address varying needs, light and heavy. But just like, real estate, location, however we derive at an answer concerning the listserv, I think if you are a council member, then you should always take the opportunity to communicate. So I have a background in communications. I would like to help in this area. I think the overall communications of the VMA is sorely lacking. We have no social media presence. Our wrap-up is fine. Our Martin's Edition e-news is fine. The newsletters are fine. But we're really missing some opportunities for more resident contact. So I would say, yes to the listserv, but even above and beyond, we need to improve our total umbrella of communications.
Thank you, Katie. Andrew?
Thanks, and thanks to Kathy as well. Look, I really appreciate the creation of this listserv. I've gotten some great electricians out of it. I've got some great contractors out of it. It serves its purpose on that front. But I do agree that we have to have something that's more formalized, that's run by the council, by the village. But we do need a mechanism as to how constituents raise concerns. It can't just be a free-for-all, because that's just everything's gonna slip through the cracks. So again, having an open forum or having the ability to email your council members as you do right now. But I think even as importantly, and just as Larry said, having Jeff and Arthur email us on the listserv, just like members of Congress, why don't we hear from our individual council members when they want to share something? I mean, they have to run for re-election if they decide to do so. So it's part of constituent service, and it's a part of informing us. So I think an official listserv, if we're hiding behind the private one, we don't engage, that would be the way forward. So I would support that for sure.
Thank you, Andrew. Marty?
This is an issue near and dear to my heart. And I want to thank Josh Bowers, who originally created listserv, and Bill Leibowitz, who's been running it for many years, longtime volunteers. But what we need here is something that a lot of government agencies do, which is a message board to have amongst the community, not just one-way discussions from us to a council member. But a message board can be organized by topics. You can talk about ordinances, you can talk about street cleaning, whatever. But that would clear up the informal, unofficial listserv for things like the electricians and plumbers. And it would also give us a community-wide forum where we could talk to each other and share information about trees or anything. So a message board is an official government mechanism that many, many agencies use. We also, I think, need to have many more open forums. When a subject comes up, we want to talk to each other. We got a lot of smart people here, thank goodness. And like Larry said, I've learned a lot from what people said on the listserv. I find the listserv very valuable but limited. It's time to actually have a structured communication program here. So thank you. Message board, open forums, and in terms of liability, have a contractor handle it. Simple as that. I think that's going to be very easily done, and I pledge to do it.
Thank you, Marty. So, our first question builds on the previous question and encompasses a number of questions that were asked, and ultimately that got to one kind of core question. Village contracts with service providers to perform necessary functions such as refuse and recycling collection, tree care, building enforcement, consume more than half of the village's annual expenses. Are there any services or programs not currently provided through the village that you, as a council member, would work to see enacted? Andrew?
That's a great question. I do think we are spending our money wisely. I do think we can spend it in additional ways. It goes back to one of my concerns, and that's the policing part. If we can't spend it on 3 trash pickups a week, I think we can spend it on things for us as a community. So that would be my priority. I think it's an easy fix for concerns that folks have both at night when we had the issue with folks opening car doors and rifling through cars, but also, as I mentioned earlier, with stop signs. There's no greater disincentive from running a stop sign when seeing a cop car parked right there and keeping track of you. So I think that's one thing that stands out to me. There are many other ways to spend our money. I mentioned it a little earlier, how we could do that, but for right now, that would be my top priority.
Thank you, Andrew. Marty?
I love this question. Thank you for asking it. Composting should be included in our normal village services package along with recycling. I've been advocating that for years. I pledge to do it. If we can get the votes in the council to pass it, it'll be done. I'd like to see electronics recycling. And it'd be great to have a batteries bin where we can all put, the batteries that can't go in the regular trash and take that up to the dump, to recycle correctly. There's simple things like that come into an environmental agenda that I very much support. No new ordinances, just good services. I also think that we could do more security patrols. I think Larry brought that up in his candidate statement. And the timing of them and the location, again, the stop sign running is just egregious. I also think that we should put more village lighting wherever people ask for it. I've been asking for more lighting on Chestnut Street for several years and got nowhere. But I think that can change. It's not just where the lighting expert says you have adequate lighting. It's where we think we need more lighting. Again, I would go to villagers and ask directly, do you need more lighting on your street or this section of your street? Tell us. The surplus should be used for services that make us safer and happier and better off. It's our well-being. And that also help our neighbors. Again, I think that supporting Manna or finding some way to support schools would be great. So lots of good things we can do here.
Thank you. Larry?
Yes. Since prior to 1975, we've had fire hydrants here that have never been flushed, never been inspected. The assumption is, unfortunately, WSSC owns them, and WSSC has no ability to take care of them. And they are severely at risk and totally unreliable. We need to do something about that. Why? Well, remember the silliness down in Texas where people's homes couldn't be heated because gas lines are full of water and frozen? That happened right here in Martin's Additions last year. And it's been going on for 3 years with gas leaks around the area. And our council isn't set up to solve or take care of those problems. And I guarantee you, I will take care of those problems. We've also got major stormwater issues because WSSC was bankrupt and Montgomery County has just taken over that system. And improvements in that are sorely needed. So those are at least three of the things. Plus, I believe that we need ticketing and police presence And we don't
Thank you, Larry.
supervisory people that we're using. We need patrolmen.
Thank you, Larry. Brian?
Thank you, George, and thanks for the question. I do think there's some areas that the neighborhood and the village can look at improving our services, increasing our services, but I also believe in fiscal responsibility. I think composting is an area that we should look at. I think there's about 55 households currently participating in the composting program, and I think when that becomes a feasible thing for the village to pick up, I think we should. I think we should consider a second recycling day pickup. We currently have 2 trash pickups, but only 1 recycling, and I know I have more recyclable goods than I do trash, and I think that's an area we should look at. Just to clarify some things, I do believe the fire department has said they have vowed to look into flushing the fire hydrants and the lines that Larry has brought up. But I do not support policing just for ticketing. I support safety patrols. I support policing for safety and watching the households, but I don't support it for ticketing. I think there's ways that we can calm traffic, and it's just going to wind up with a bunch of us in court.
Thank you, Brian.
At a time.
Thank you, Brian. Alex?
Sure, thanks, George. I think the first thing on my list, or the highest priority, would be what we just concluded discussing in the previous question. I think a new community communication tool will require some initial development, so initial cost up front, and some management or maintenance. So that would be a service that would be high on my priority list. Composting is an interesting thing. Our household compost, I think it's good for the environment, but it is a very small minority of the village households that do it right now. I would like to campaign a bit more for that, and if we can get more enthusiasm for it, make it a universal village service after that. And then thirdly, I too would like to improve our security service. I'm not sure that additional patrolmen or a private security service is the way to do it. I'd like to gain some more input on what cost-effective options are available to us. I believe that Montgomery County Police have made some suggestions along those lines that steered away from off-duty patrolmen and towards technology, for example.
Thank you, Alex. Katie?
Thank you. We talk a lot about the money and how to show it to us. I think services are top notch. I'd like to see continuation of that. I'm a fan of, another day of recycling, composting, but also fixing, maybe adding street cameras, better signage. But also, in addition to our pretty healthy budget, we're due money too. I mean, in addition, according to estimates by the National League of Cities and the Maryland Municipal League, Martin's Addition is eligible for up to $800,000 from the American Rescue Plan. And I want to know if our council has applied for this, and if so, what are their plans? I mean, is it just going to be more stockpiling? Let's make improvements. I mean, this is also already to our hefty budget. So I think we're also due money, and we have more room for improvements to work with.
Thank you, Katie. So our next question addresses something that is...
George?
Yes, Larry.
Okay, I would like to correct something. Brian used my name, and he made a statement that... Okay, so WSSC owns the fire hydrants. They will not allow at the present time, and have not for over 50 years, allowed any hydrants except that allowed the village to do it. And it's time that we used our local representatives to change that legislation and take that responsibility over so it's done properly. The fire department cannot test them and cannot flush the sediment from them.
Thank you, Larry. Moving on to our next question, addresses an issue that is currently under discussion with the council and was discussed at the most recent council meeting. It addresses, or it builds on that. It is, the village is currently evaluating approaches relating to clarifying the guidance on garage door width issue. Thoughts and your planned approach to council enforcement of building codes, particularly the prohibition on two-car garages. Marty?
Glad to tackle this one. It's a big issue here. The two-car garage at the corner of Field and Taylor is quite conspicuous. It's front-facing right there. And I think that the we don't need new ordinances particularly, but we do need to enforce the ones we have. And there seems to have been a misstep here, as Arthur said, perhaps on the listserv not long ago. I appreciate Arthur addressed the issue because it's been quite a concern. The garages, if you're building these bigger houses, that's part of the real estate agents. Real estate agents like your 2-car garages, that sells better. It's marketing real estate angle on that. But we have a prohibition that says 10-foot wide driveways. And I personally would like to see any 2-car garage be set back and not be like right in our faces. This one actually protrudes in front of. So I think that number one, we need to be more careful about paying attention and enforcing. But number two, we really need to keep the character of our village, not to have mansions with huge driveways and garages right in our face. There's something to be said for the character here that I think is part of what we love and value. And
Thank you, Marty.
Enough. I'll look into it because I think it's important.
Thank you,
Marty.
And
Thanks, George. I think I'd start with let's enforce what's in place before construction begins on these homes, and I get it. Mistakes were made, but let's have a village lawyer. We have folks in enforcement here at the village, so there are a lot of homes being torn down and new ones being built, and I've mentioned this in the previous forum that these developers, they ask for forgiveness. As to these 2-car garages, and I hate to quote more of my fellow residents, but I think Tom Plotz wrote an email about these garages, these monster garages and homes behind them. We have pretty restrict zoning laws here, and we should enforce them, but I don't want to get overly bureaucratic. So I think if it's in place, it shouldn't happen, but I think we could also take enough zoning rules are in place in this instance.
thank you, Andrew. Brian?
I want to thank Arthur for getting on and this point of view. My understanding is that the zoning they currently have defines a corner lot as having 2 front yards. Unfortunately, the previous garage door code stated that V, not A, in this case, manipulated the code and got the garage door passed. I don't think it's something that's going to happen again in the future. I'm not opposed to 2-car garages on the side of the house that aren't exposed to the front view of the street. We live in a modern society with 2-car households. I'm for anything to get the cars off to increase sight lines. So again, I don't think this issue is going to come again unless, again, the code is being fixed from the front yard to a front yard, so we don't have to worry about that. It's always been defined as having 2 front yards. We're not really changing. We're clear.
Thank you, Brian. Katie?
Yeah, I mean, the council did clarify this, but I mean, like a lot of things with the current council, I found them to be a day late and $1 short on it. Personally, I'm not a fan of 2-car garages. I do think it changes the look of the neighborhood, but that said, the ordinance, it just should be clearer going forward because our neighborhood is under chronic construction, and I think that, that is the future. The houses will be torn down. There will be people moving in looking for that look, so we need clearer language forward when it comes to dealing with next projects down the road. But personally, not a fan, but I think they're going to happen. So language of the ordinance and all of our ordinances really, but the council would have done a better job clearing that up.
Thank you, Katie. Alex?
Sure, thanks, George. Yeah, in short, I would like to keep the intent of the code, which is to say only allow 1-car garage, and so I'm in support of updating the wording of the ordinance to make that more clear and more defensible. I think I would have preferred to go about enforcing that intended ordinance, which is to say requiring a change to the design of the house to meet the ordinance intent. But as I discussed that, it turns out that the vague wording seems like it would cause some difficulty defending that decision in legal forms. So I think that this was an unfortunate mistake by the inspector. I think the inspector has been doing a reliable. I think mistakes are normal here, but I would like to keep an eye out and maybe start to impose or suggest an inspector or an independent review to make sure that nothing else slips through the cracks. It's unfortunate the slip fell in this perfect crack that would make it very hard to enforce the code because of the vague wording. But I want to make sure that nothing slips and we'll be open to suggestions on how to do that best.
Alex. Larry?
Thank you. So I think that when I looked at it, I saw last year we collected $12,000 for permits, and we spent $65,000 in enforcement. And I found the enforcement, and by the way, I am a licensed building inspector and know these codes. I found it poorly adhered to. And I also want to say that that our order codes need to be looked at, and if possible, I would just beg Tom Platts to be one of the people working on that. And also Holly Worthington, whose input on it is absolutely invaluable, because we need uniformity. We're allowing this to happen on sites that are not corner lots. Why is that? So that's it. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. So at this time, we wanted to move to candidates having an opportunity for a closing statement. The closing statements should be 60 seconds, so I think Niles should not need time to reset the timer. But for the candidate closing statements, Brian, you're up first.
Thank you, George. Again, thank you for the committee for having this forum tonight. In closing, I was nominated and endorsed to run for council because I'm committed to serve the entire village, fair governance, and equal consideration. I pledge to see what is best for our community as a whole, without bias or personal agenda. But at the end of this election, we are all still neighbors. There is no us versus them, no north side. We are all residents of the village, and we're lucky to be that. This is a great neighborhood. It's the call of service to the community, and we should be appreciated as such. For those of the community that are watching the forum, I would appreciate your vote and have your ballot mailed in on time. Thank you for your time tonight. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via email. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Katie?
As a candidate, I have really taken the opportunity to listen to residents. There are residents who have attended council meetings, volunteered their time to the VMA, but feel undervalued by our representation and burned out. There are residents who are currently involved in the community and attend council meetings, but are met with fierce divisiveness. And then there are the new residents. Welcome. You have been probably wondering throughout this election, what's all the local drama and fuss about? And why have all the candidates, myself included, peppered your porches and doorsteps of our messages? It's because this election is crucial for change. As a resident, I attended the recent Public Safety Task Force Committee meeting, and one resident poignantly said she just wants to see harmony again after so much community discord, and I couldn't agree more. So please take it from me, as someone who grew up in the VMA, and has brought back her own family. It doesn't have to be like this. And if you haven't already, check your ballot for correct your vote.
Thank you, Katie. Andrew?
Thanks. I want to thank the election committee as well as my fellow candidates again for a great discussion this afternoon. For those who did not attend the previous forum and hope to listen to the audio, I will repeat the following. As the father of 3 young boys, my daily goal is a sense of calm and harmony in my home. I'm not always successful, but I have that very goal for the council, the dynamics behind closed doors, but also how it engages with the community. Your local representatives should be respectful, and local government should be fun, it should be interesting, and of course it will always be challenging. We deserve to have these 2 seats filled with independently minded candidates who have the right temperament to bring calm to the equation after a rather tumultuous year. When we're off the council, I look forward to playing my part to make this an even better place to raise a family or retire. So I thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Andrew. Larry?
What Andrew said, and I want all the villagers to know that I share the philosophies and the platforms that Marty and Andrew and Katie have. The candidate would be happy they are elected to council. Of course, I'd like to be elected to council, and I think I have the experience and the integrity to maybe win your vote. I can tell you that Harmony did leave the Council Village. I've spoken to her. She has promised that if I'm elected, she'll move back into the village. So,
Thank you, Larry. Marty?
just want to say I appreciate the touch of humor, Larry. I think that in addition to all the very pragmatic things we've talked about in terms of speeding, traffic, and all of that, we also need to look again at pragmatic procedures that people feel respected and how we handle council meetings, friendly council meetings, sensible, open procedures, ways for residents to put things on a to-do list so they don't disappear. All of that creates an atmosphere of respect as opposed to disrespect. And, just answering people's questions, being available, not having kind of the steel doors playing shut if you go to a meeting. So all of this is about how you do things, not just what you do. But I also want to say, geez Louise, let's have some fun here. We have some wonderful ideas for kids projects, kids art projects, and the gardening projects. We have some wonderful ideas for ways to really help newcomers get tied in here more and bring in long-time and new residents. There is so much that we could do, and let's do it. Instead of spending time on negative ordinances that just divide us, let's let go there. There's all kinds of really positive things we could do pragmatically for safety, and let's have some fun. I mean, we need to really heal here, and I'm a very experienced manager. Love doing things like that. I do troubleshooting. I love to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex?
Thanks, George. And I really appreciate your timeliness on this forum. So we're nearly right on time. I observed and commented on the council's, I guess, temperament. And I noticed that in the council too. And as much as I have appreciated the support, my neighbor Susan and running for this, I heard the frustration from the attacks that have been levied against her growing, and that has come through in her demeanor here in the council, and that's a shame. I do think, however, that in a time like this, the way to confront that is not by attacking members, but by being supportive that criticism as well, by saying we understand that you're frustrated, but I have also felt that you're being you're participating in a and that's the kind of listening and communicating that I would like to bring to the council, so that we can make it through this moment where everybody has felt frustrated, everybody has felt constrained, and that we come back to that harmony state that so many
Thank you, Alex.
and myself have been striving towards.
Thank you. So that concludes the candidate forum. I would like to, again, on behalf of the election committee and myself, say thank you to all of the candidates for making time in your schedule for this. I want to say thank you to everyone who has attended either of the candidate forums, who shared their questions, their support for the election committee in helping put this forum together. A few quick housekeeping things for anyone on. If you have any questions about how your name or you appear on the qualified voter roll, if you have not received your ballot, or if you have spoiled your ballot, meaning you spilled coffee on it, the dog got a hold of it, anything like that, please reach out to Niles. It's manager@martinsedition.org, or you can call the office at 301-656-4112 and work with Niles on that. The deadline for doing so is Friday, the May 6th at 5 p.m. If you do that, we can make sure we get a ballot. That ballot is sent over to you, a replacement ballot if need be, if something has happened to yours, in time for it to be get over to you in time. Please, everyone, remember, get your ballots in the mail. They must be postmarked May 13th and must be received by the vendor by 5 p.m. on May 20th, so about 2.5 weeks from now. So please get those in the mail. And again, I wanted to say thank you to all of the candidates. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in, and thank you to everyone in the village for their continued interest and engagement in the election process this year. Thank you.
I'm going to end. With that, I'm going to end the meeting for all, just so you don't have to get off. I'll end it for everyone.
Thank you, Naz.